I know, even if you think you are not too many, I think this much of gathering of educated Naga youth is not happening anywhere else than here. So please, if I provoke you, please don't take it as I am provoking you personally, but I want to provoke Naga youth. And so I will speak in Jambos. Okay. Before we get into what Constitution and flag means, I want to take back, ask all of us to go a little bit backward and see how wise men of the ages have begun their discussion about how human beings ought to live together. And this one I have in mind Aristotle. Aristotle says human beings are born to be citizens. But you also remember Aristotle says there are human beings who are naturally suitable to be slaves. And then you would also say women are not fully developed. And this part, the women part, puts many people off from even discussing or going through his discussion on what he means by born to be citizens. You may also remember he's also the one who says men are by nature social beings. So he also insists that each one of us can develop to our potentials only in the company of others. And so polis was very important for him, meaning city or living together, from which we today have words like politics. Politics from Greek root, if we go back there, would mean living together in a group, association. And I want to take back your mind to these things only to see if it helps to identify where do we begin when we talk of Constitution or a symbol of our unity like flag. Where do we begin? And why should we begin from a particular point of view? And I want to raise this question also because I am aware of the fact that many of you are very familiar, perhaps even subscribing to postmodernism. If I had time, I would have liked to hear from you which part of the postmodernism is attracting you most, or your attention, capturing your attention most. So, without giving you a chance to say your views or share your views, let me just jump to another point. Constitution. When we talk of Constitution, it is very likely in in other circumstances, not today, but in other circumstances, we are likely to just think how a particular legal text, naming who is the executive, what is the head of the government, and so on. We are likely to imagine that part. But because of our rare circumstance, I think you might be thinking much deeper than that. What would be a constitution for us? We all know it has something to do with our future. But how that future can be anticipated, future can be dreamed, more specifically, where do we stand in order to get proper orientation for that future? This part, I think, is your generation's challenge. So, I want to, I would see in our situation, maybe we can have, three perspectives. Let's say layman's view of the Constitution, and then activist view of the Constitution, and of course we can also peek into what the legal experts will talk about. From a layman's point of view, we know when we talk about Constitution, we have our history, what our forefathers have done, have said, what they dreamed. That's part of the beginning of our Constitution. How any one of us can think of what our forefathers have done, have said, have taught, their practice, their experience, their wishes, which they couldn't fulfill, nonetheless is spoken in our folk songs, in our mythologies. And then our worldview, what the world, where we are, what is human being. Like Aristotle, our forefathers took for granted that human beings have to live together. And it is this part which is not clear at all today to any one of you, even to me, even though I am much older than you. Because by the time, let's say, about 100 years, our elders were being under siege by new ideas, new powers, and more advanced technologies. And so you find, and we know that in most cases, they didn't even try to write down their memory. And few where it is written, often it is not from what you call appreciation point. It's been to underline that we were primitive. Now, these points may seem very far from what we have to do today. But if you are insisting that we have a unique history, and if you are also standing by your belief that popular sovereignty is the worldly, internationally accepted way of looking at aspirations of different people, then if we stand that way, then we have to go back to what our people were doing, what they were saying, and what we thought they should do. We have to go back there. And we have not completely lost them. We just, in terms of knowledge, in terms of value, we have ignored it. Village administration. Autonomous village governing body. It may not be the structure that may be so important to us, but definitely the process that our people are used to go through in order to bring harmony, in order to flourish as a people. And these are something that you and I should be thinking about, even when engaging in developing a modern constitution. This will be perhaps not pleasant to any one of you, because it is a lot more comfortable to talk or think in terms of just reproducing what India has. And the only thing that if we are just reproducing what India has, or copying, and our argument about the right to develop our own constitution is totally lost, because the moral ground on which we stand, and also in the international usage, is like when we use the term self-determination. You are in fact describing, in other words, the right of a community which has a distinct character, and the right of that community to have that distinct character reflected in the institutions of government, is it not? But here we're not ready, as far as I understand, about taking into account our history, our culture, knowledge that are with us in terms of how we build a village, how we dialogue within the village. All those things are not part of any consideration, in my opinion, in the eyes of those who possibly may be writing out the Constitution. And you educated, you are deprived of any chance to even raise a question. I know this is not your age to think that, okay, we write this way Constitution, no. But you have a right to demand that whatever Constitution is written, which your generation will be the one to operate, must be a Constitution that is not just copied from some existing state system. Something that brings to bear upon the way government is operated. I know I am not making sense to you, but so that is one question I have. I just have in my heart, and I want to share that one. You have every right to demand that anyone who is involved in drafting a constitution must look into our governance system, which we know is one of the best. It's just that the scope was small. They didn't have high technology to work with. We were not involved in extensive trade kind of system. So our outlook seemed to be small, narrow. But it was good for that age, because you can also find from folk songs especially, and few legends that people were living with dignity and security. So village was, some people would say everything. And when we say village was everything, it is that community that stays in their respective state. In my opinion, India is still so rigidly buried in the tradition of the evolution of power, decentralization, which means center supervise everything. The unit, they might have this power, but they still dependent on the center's supervision. And that, I think I don't have to say it anymore. If we would like somebody to supervise us from distance, if you go and see, then you can only see stars, not where I live. How realistic that supervision would be. And then we have other models where even if they had begun as a unitary government, the subsequent allotment or designation of jurisdictions have allowed them to develop into relationship as if they had begun with federalism from the start, where you all know better than me, political science students especially, the federating subjects are limited and defined. Often whatever subject is not defined remains with the unit. And they have not broken apart, they have not fallen apart. Because I think the units often find it a lot more conducive for healthy growth to be in the company of other federating units. Today you see Europe more and more debating on, coming together more and more, sharing more and more power together. They are not under dictatorship by any force, but as part of the cooperation things, it will be more economically secure. So India, in a way, I think population-wise, is even larger than Europe, I think. So for India to visualize federation more, closer to traditional federalism is likely to be, in my opinion, more helpful to individuals to even gain more confidence. And if we debate as to how we will manage the political space that will come out of the top in ways that is not just what you call partisan, but as a potential partner of India, then I think reservations like our elder has spoken, like Ravi, whoever is there, they may perhaps want to re-examine. And we all know the people who are at the peace talk, they have very tough job to do when they share something and then to explain to their boss. Often the bosses don't understand at all because they have little exposure to the history of the region, especially in the case of India. So I think I'm not far off from truth. If say Modi will hardly understand how even the Naga village functions. Yeah, so Ravi has to do a lot of explaining. If he was to find what we argue in terms of developing a constitution that would recognize like the village government system, and starting from village governing system, we would have tribe or district, whatever we call sub-region, and then the territorial council. If he was to examine, report back this one, I think he will be hard pressed in order to, make appeal to the reasoning of the Prime Minister. So we know that, and if we don't take initiative to discuss it widely, we have not engaged Indian intellectuals. In my opinion, that is one of the great setback we have suffered. Maybe my generation has not been asserting enough, to insist that our political leaders allow people to discuss, drink together, even, just do some theoretical, hypothetical, whatever term they use, erect some institution, and then examine if it can really work. We have not done it. And for me, as an activist, I really think that is very useful. As I mentioned to you, I don't have the discipline of an academician or a professional. I am everywhere. So, but I really think we should examine what possibly, like for example, we were just doing some brainstorming, and without knowing what will be the actual, what you call arrangement. So if from what we heard rumor, if there will be 4 separate physical kind of setting under 4 states, Nagaland state, Arunachal, Manipur, Assam. In those 3 parts especially, we can at the most have something possibly they may designate as territorial autonomous polity. And in that case, the highest or the furthest India possibly can go would be to directly link that territory to Delhi in terms of, let's say, physical arrangement. It is much easier to say this way than to see in which case, in that case, supposing, let's say Manipur, if the territorial autonomous polity here is directly related to Delhi in a physical way, what kind of jurisdiction Manipur possibly will exercise over that territory, and in what way? If the territory's financial needs are all coming from Delhi, or it's arranged with Delhi, whether you tax in the territory, still send it to Delhi and then come back to you, what will Manipur state do? if we are absent-mindedly sending our representative to Manipur Assembly, what will they speak? And for what reason they would be allowed to speak? It can amount to interfere with the Manipur government's genuine subject. So you have this kind of difficulties. Now, and then you need to put those four bodies together, like Manipur, Assam, Arunachal, Naga. Let's say, as they say, 371A Constitution article is replaced with a more powerful clause. Whatever it means, whatever that means, more powerful. Possibly, or we would say it would be logical to remove governor's special power. That would be a logical beginning, because Nagaland seems to have everything, Nagaland state. Yet, in practice, executive power, large power, is with the government. So that part would be something to consider. To consider the formulating that power may be logical. But still, we still have a huge problem of how these four territories will be related. What subject would be in the hands of the common body, like let's say Nagaland Council, whatever name they keep. Which subjects that council will be entitled to operate, handle. This is a big issue. And there, for me, just now, if we were to argue immediately, would be to raise issues that are not traditionally handled by, or the governments are not fond of handling. Like, let's say, environment, or capacity building for these four districts, their administration. Who will develop their bureaucracy? Will it be still like as it is today? Center governs every state by and through the common civil service cabinet, like IAS, IFS, and IP. You don't find it in many countries where federalism, in a way, may be described as method. You will find in almost all those federations, the units have their own separate civil service bureaucracy. They are set up separately, oriented separately, that you will find even they have tariffs, trade, when they are not balanced, some province will just shut down. No, we don't allow this import anymore. So even police, the central police will assist state police only when states require it, or if a federal crime has been committed, the federal police will take the help of the provinces, because there is no federal territory separately. They are all, either of this unit or this unit. So the culprit or the incident will be taking place inside or within the jurisdiction of a union. And therefore, federal forces would go request for help from the province. This is how they cooperate. So even in the sense of ranking, right, federal police are in no way higher than the provinces. If there is any sense of ranking, it is about your seniority, how long, how you have worked. There's different levels of government. Federal is higher, but employees, in terms of how they are valued, is in terms of how senior they are in their place of work, not because they work at the center or in the province. So they don't even campaign in the provinces. Supposing we have, let's say, people as a direction. Those who are not seeking political space or leadership or delegation within DIP, but who are looking at going to the parliament, often they would make themselves scarce. They would not make accessible by various parties. Even if my party is fighting tooth and nail, I have to keep quiet because my opening my mouth might in fact point to my party that these people don't know what federalism is. And so that much awareness, right, is not written in the law. As you are all very familiar, in many countries, their constitutions are in fact 2-3 legal texts, and large part of it is not even written. So if we are talking about Naga constitution, we are also going to talk about how much of this constitution needed to be written, how much of it we are confident by practice, by convention, we can follow, we can observe. So it may sound like impossible things, but we have an important opportunity to challenge ourselves and see if our imaginations, when through this kind of discussion, could be given some structure, if they make sense. Now, we have Samana. I'm not trying to adhere to you. Samana has come. I think maybe from my knowledge, she's the only lawyer. Anyone else?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Okay.
2-3 of them.
I was just thinking, if there are no lawyers, we will talk in terms of how we may dip into your thoughts. As laymen, how the lawyers will try to convert our dreams into legal texts, and in your absence, allow ourselves to think that we are able to see part of your thoughts, to receive lawyers' thoughts. So, maybe I have taken talk too much. Maybe hear from others. Yeah. But I think if we talk more, we can maybe come up with some structures and see if they look anything worth reasoning. Yeah. Constitution. As far as most of the NSM cadres are concerned, they have not yet put forward a constitution. at the top. Again, take that as more or less the official position, because these comments came from people who were actually involved in drafting Constitution some 10 years ago. Angelus Shimrao was known. He was the person who led that group. So those who were with him, they are the ones who said. They presented draft to the two leaders, hoping it will be discussed widely. In their case, if they had completed, now I only learned they had considered many constitutions in the world. Perspective, in my opinion, was like the colonial day politicians who drafted the constitution without thinking of their local, ability to understand the constitution and put it in practice. I don't think Nehru and others would have succeeded, even to the extent they succeeded, if it was not because of the bureaucracy they inherited. In terms of grassroots knowledge of the Constitution, I don't think they did much to get strength from the local people's support or understanding of what that Constitution means. So we have, supposing our peace talk team or our team at the top were presenting a constitution, how will you react to it? How will you take it? Because constitution is not something secret. It cannot be secret. It will be suicidal. And people who are standing up in the name of popular sovereignty cannot go for structuring a governance that doesn't recognize sovereign rights of the people. You cannot. It's a suicide. And we should be as furious as we are. We can. Otherwise, we are dead. When we talk of autonomy, why we should talk about constitution is because the way that autonomy will function depends on your integrity. How far are you going to help implement the policies, programs? How far are you ready to respect the authority of that autonomy? How we will structure in terms of how we delegate from time to time power to this power body to serve our common interest. If we don't think, if we don't apply our mind at the starting of what this tool would, how it will function, then we're already just, it's almost like Hobbes' idea of Leviathan, you know, that you build this monster, and then under the monster you are united. If the monster is not there, you are all scattered. No, our people must not continue to allow anybody to entertain the idea that we are going to have a government where we have no responsibility. It's spiritually cursed, practically it is so wrong. We cannot. And that is why we need to debate. You may think your knowledge is just too low or your knowledge is too high. No. It's not going to be too high or too low if we are going to have a government of our own. We must debate to allow the dark corners in our mind to be illuminated through even painful discussion, persuasion. And this is what Aristotle says. Why some people are suited to be slaves? He thinks a police or a city is there if the people living there has the capacity to deliberate, to dialogue. Those who do not have that power are better be slaves than citizens. So thousands of years ago, there has been already some people who recognize the importance of building, allowing our political structures to facilitate dialogue, deliberation, and he calls the ideal government as polity, and not even democracy, more than democracy, because this is exercising everybody by consensus. You have a place in the city we live, like our ancestors did in the village. Everyone had a place. Now you think of trade, and we are also confronted today, not only I think in Delhi, but in almost everywhere you more than any, with theories where nothing is right, nothing is wrong. The idea of relativism, where from which boundary to what boundary you need to have relativism, why you should have relative kind of concept, where, because you political science students and maybe sociologists, you know better than me that human beings by nature are gifted with understanding the wrong way, right way. And it is because their capacity to have this, they have this capacity to know the right way, wrong way. They could anticipate what reactions, if you do something, you will get from the other person. And it is an extension of that anticipation, capacity to anticipate, when we talk of self-determination. People with common beliefs are not just about that belief, but about using similar standard, similar tools to decipher each other's thoughts, to receive each other's appeal. You use the same yardstick, I use the same yardstick, even if you may not be so consistent, even if I'm not so consistent. You know when I'm not consistent, you still know that I know I am not consistent. I'm not foreign to the yardstick you have. And it is that kind of people who can easily bond together and develop the trust necessary to come together, work for a common good. And that is why politically people come to say self-determination. That self-determination is about ability for people to bond together. If they didn't have it, then they shouldn't speak about self-determination. It's almost like you go out on the road just now and then somebody, you never know, to go home together and hope to cook things that you may know you like or you don't like. Other person, whether he would think it is an offense or not when you are going home together. It is this kind of distance that human beings have difficulty to embrace, and therefore allowing them to have some area where they are comfortable. And if it is very large, then you articulate it in the form of self-governance, independence. So independence is not just about some momentary dictatorship you want to free from. No. Independence is about countless number of people able to think together and chart their future forward. If we have no similarities, like we had difficulty with Indian leaders in the 1930s, when NNC wrote that this was 1940 something, when NNC last time when they placed their memorandum with the British authorities. One hate us for eating beef, other one hate us for eating pork. Nothing could, I think, better represent the distance between our people and mainland India at that time. It's just simply impossible, beyond our capacity to bridge in terms of finding some common ground. It was almost impossible. It is that kind of vision. I'm not saying that kind of raw, it is not that raw today. But deep in our hearts, we all have a beginning, and some of us have continued to cry for what we know is the village republic. And it is not just name, it is about how we deal with each other. So this is, I speak these things as a way of also to invite you or encourage you to think. Why village republic work? On what ground our village authorities were erected, founded? Common village land. Community land was one of the foundations of our village life. And that is fast vanishing today. How are we going to articulate? Will our love and our inability to intellectually separate from that attachment, even though it may not be there anymore? I think deep in our heart, all of us think of the village. So whether we will be contributing to its fast disappearance, or we can see, try to rescue part of the village that we know. Now, for you, I think you all know some Naga villages have successfully developed arrangements, measures to prevent certain ecologically harmful practices, like banning use of agri-based chemicals, for example. That unless the village themselves decide to implement, there is no state or other kind of machinery that can successfully implement. So it is these things when you are able to see immediate connection of your life with what is happening on the ground, that you may be able to come forward more earnestly and maybe without even rhetoric. Now, are we not going to try to enlarge the advantage of such government using your wisdom and make it applicable in the future that we all have been looking for a long, long time? Please, never mind if I am not making sense, just just hit me even if you think you are being polite. It is okay. Just let us raise pointed questions and try to see what constitution in our context, in what way it may be drafted, who should know. If we are, as we claim, democratic people, then the sovereignty lodged in the people has to have room for expressing at the forum which will be determining our dreams into legal text. So if you find some views not difficult to appreciate, please still don't hold back. I think it is good that even the most disagreeing views should be put forward. Only then we know how our views diverge and where we can meet. How to, exactly how our parents used to do back in the olden days. How village reach this culture of consent, consensus, consent. Our villagers were not known to have ever exercised power which in the legal usage they say capital punishment, for example. Luingam, I am from Luingam village. Luingam village has no record that anyone was given that punishment, regardless of what happened. And there was no other authority administering justice in the village or in our village. So our people had, in their wisdom, always looked for consensus. And if you take 300-400 years of such life, you may say, we were known to follow a culture of consent. Why we should have a constitution? This is a question from the beginning and now also. We should ask this question again and again. Just before coming to that point, just one small thing, I may not be totally comprehensive, but I said the question why we should have a constitution. In every federation, a federation by definition is it's unique, having something of their own. When we say having something of their own, in this context, it could be a written constitution or very familiar conventions, norms by which they govern themselves, even without a written text. So it is that part that federation will not touch. And in our present case, when India and we talk, the areas that India will not, or the federation cannot touch, will be, I think, pointed out in the treaty. the treaty is the one that will say whether they are going to follow a particular type of federation, that is, name all the subjects which would be with the center, or name all the subjects which would be with the federating unit. Whatever is not named, in case it is about naming of subjects which would be in the center, with the center. Whatever is not named is in tradition, if I may call it, is with the federating unit. But if they should sit to instead list subjects with the, which would be with the unit, then whatever is not named is with the center. So whatever they may choose, subjects are already separate. And this will be safeguarded, protected by federating principle, or there will not be federation. So this is what in some countries I know are practicing. You don't have what you call similar kind of practice in terms of whether subjects are listed or not. US, Canada, or England, they have different, some variations on these things. But it is no violation of the sovereignty of that federation when a federating unit has a flag, has a constitution. No, that assumption is not well based. Okay? The reason for having a federation is, as I was just throwing some ideas to you in the beginning of this. Our constitution will recognize our wisdom, our weaknesses, which Indian constitution cannot. As you know, India has one of the longest written constitution in the world. And you are right, they are trying to capture, the diversity that India covers. 300 something articles. They try to capture the diversity in India, but it is not sufficient. Because we know, for example, Prime Minister Modi, let's say, however educated he is, it will be still so hard for him to take into heart what the Tamil is feeling when something happens down there, or what the Naga is feeling when his cows or his buffaloes are, butchered and eaten by somebody. The distance is not just rhetoric. Distance is often emotional and real. That is why for India, I would dream that every state should have some space to articulate their priorities, even when they have articulated their priorities. In what way they want to approach the priorities? Will it be like I sit here in the public office and when somebody comes and says, yeah, it is that one I am thinking of when we talk of our own constitution. Here you have a government where every office is loaded with power and pressure. You step into any government office and expect polite exchange. No. And why? Are they inhuman? No. There is a mismatch in my understanding between their capacity and the vastness of the land. So you could have structural efficiencies, procedural effects, all those things, then you see your government as the embodiment, like an embodiment of the very thing you don't like to see ever in your life. This is what's happening in many countries. It is happening, yes, in many countries in Asia. And one of the reasons, other than the vastness, is also government in India was designed not at all in manners that people can understand. Government was designed in a way that fits into, in my understanding, I may be wrong, but in my understanding, that fits into the tradition of caste hierarchy. And it is easily also for the bureaucracy to transport hierarchical system that they find in the tradition of Hinduism. And these are some of the struggles which, as human beings, we can share with them if we design our government properly. On the other hand, if we just follow what they have, then we will be sinning against our own conscience, because then we are going to be not only hurting ourselves, but we will also be lending legitimacy to what is already we know is wrong. So we have a challenge. I'm not sure if I picked up your question fully, but we cannot talk about constitution rightfully and with moral kind of conscience if we are just going to reproduce something that India already has. Then it would mean we are what you call racist, because the separation between them and us would be just the name Naga. It's not how we think, how we want to live. There's nothing in terms of what actually we want to do, except for the namesake. We are Nagas. We have a flag. What will our flag represent? In my opinion, has to do a lot with how we will organize the political space that will come out of the top. Otherwise, it could be not only just exercise in vain, but hazardous to our own well-being. So, okay, I know I'm not talking anything nice to you, but I really think your generation has to become challenged to push older people to open up for discussion. And even invite constitutional experts, because we need some image to be in front of us so we can examine our thoughts by looking at